Hello, welcome to the show, I guess, if you can call it that, if you can call it a show. I guess I'm going to be sharing my thoughts about various things, as many people do. Now, probably where you're watching this channel would have taken my namesake, and thus it would be almost too easy to just make a show after my namesake and then add the word show and the word the in front of my name and promote that and make that, I guess, part of my personal, brand, if you will, because in the 2021 economy, that's like one of the few things left that make sense. I mean, right? There's this great scene in the movie Casino, directed by Martin Scorsese. It has Joe Pesci, Robert De Niro, all those that, a lot of the Goodfellas, as Sharon Stone. And it takes place in, I guess, 1970s Las Vegas, when the mob, or a mob, I mean, it depends how you define mob, ran Las Vegas and ran the casinos, and a lot of money was involved. A lot of things were built, lives were lost, lives were made, careers were made, and careers and lives were lost in Vegas. And it's like almost a 3-hour movie. It's a very long movie, a very violent movie, an almost Shakespearean tale of love and loss, and the struggle, and your ego and your identity and all these things, while playing against a backdrop of what was happening in the country and that region at the time. So there's this scene where tensions are rising, as they do in films, and the government is looking into what the mob is doing and what the casinos are doing, and the whole setup is that the Italian mafia, they're setting up these casinos, they're bankrolling them, they're using them as a way to launder any of the other kind of the money that they're making from any of their other activities through these casinos. And you can see the movie. And Robert De Niro's character is based on a real life person by the name of something. I don't remember, but it's based on a guy who actually ran the casinos, a set of casinos in the 1970s. And part of it, and this is in the movie, is that he's a man of Jewish heritage, and the mafia being people of Italian heritage, they a lot of the business is family based. So hiring someone outside the family, so to speak, it has to be for a good reason. And the good reason, as it's laid out in the movie, is that this man of from a different family was very good at winning gambling bets. He would bet on sports games and horse races and things like that, and would win more than lose, enough to be renowned for it and make it his profession. So he was known in the community for this. And a lot of people in the family, in the mafia family, and mafia families would go to this individual to be able to see, where he was betting, and to be able to duplicate his bets or what he recommended. again, gaining a reputation for being right more than wrong. So, but there's always this, he's someone outside the family. And thus, while he's the face of the casino, and actually they make this other guy the face of the casino, again, a character I do not, you can just watch, I'm not trying to recite the whole movie, I'm just trying to give a little context for the scene. And I mean, it's my show, so I can do as I please to be able to move my show along, right? So they send the Joe Pesci character, again, the name, I think in the movie his name is Nicky Santoro, I believe. And he again is based off of a real person, and it may be a real couple of people that had these character attributes, so to speak. And he's the one in the family. He's quote unquote a made guy, which makes him untouchable. There's a whole movie or series or something called The Untouchables. Again, I'm not professing to be a film historian. I watched the movie, I enjoyed the movie, and there's a specific scene that I want to get to where it's gonna make sense as to why I'm doing this show, I suppose, if you can call it a show. So this Nicky Santoro character, and he's set up to be this rather violent, kind of on the edge kind of fella. You know, like if things are good guy to have around. If things are bad, ooh, things can get a little dicey. Things can get a little intense. And this character, as the story unfolds, again, a very Shakespearean tale, things get worse, as they do, as they tend to in these, I guess they call them crime movies, right? Mafia movies. Tragedies, in the Shakespearean sense. Things tend to go downhill over the course of time. As the movie kind of progresses, as you get closer to the end, the bad kind of starts outweighing the good. Let's just say that. And in this movie's no different. You see, as things start going, what started as a buddy-buddy relationship between Nick and Sam, Joe Pesci's and Robert De Niro's character, as time goes on, things get a little dicey. And, you know, there's all these pressures, there's all these problems that come up. You know, the FBI, the U.S. government, the guys back in Kansas City, all these other ne'er-do-wells that just kind of muck things up. And this is actually one of the themes of the movie. It starts out, there's this voiceover, you know, there's all these pretty lights of, you know, the parts of the casino, and overlaid on top of all these lights is the image of a man falling and things falling. Again, I'm not watching the movie in front of me. See, this is what makes this show exciting, is that I'm going on high speeds on the highway while trying to recite parts of this movie while trying to make a point. So bear with me. We are going to get to the root of this, the casino movie. But as we know, in today's modern times, it's about views. I mean, just look at that kid, David Dobrik, and I can call him a kid. I'm not much older than David Dobrik, but I'm old enough to call him a kid. So look at this kid, David Dobrik. Made his success through Vine, right? Or was able to establish an audience on Vine and was able to properly monetize it on YouTube. Plain and simple. Now, obviously, it's easier said than done. There is a consistency and a work ethic and a deliverability and probably, you know, strokes of luck, strokes of genius in order to get it done. And David Dobrik and this character Sam from Casino aren't so different. That's a good clickbait title. How David Dobrik and Sam Rothstein from the movie Casino are similar. That's going to be one of the titles to this video. So if you're wondering, what is this guy talking about? What is he even what are you talking about? Look at this. I got an Amazon truck, Amazon Prime truck pulling up to the right. You may be able to see it in the back at some point. Now, while this video is being produced on what many articles and writers and people have claimed is one of the most dangerous roads in America. And this is the section of I-95 which goes, whoa, 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 whoa. This car just did something I never seen it do before. This car just did, whoa. That thing revs so fast. It revs so fast. It got up to 6,500 RPM in like a heartbeat. Like a fucking heartbeat. I was like, whoa, this thing was about a red line. Whoa. Whoa, buddy. Whoa, buddy. Whoa, buddy. Whoa. Whoa. So this car is a 1999 Lexus ES300. And over the course of this show, this car and maybe whatever car that is going to become kind of like a main character in the show, you know, that I'm going to refer to for comedy and interesting material. Comedy, when referred to in the show, is anything that I find funny. Because I can't control whether you find it funny. I can't even control whether I find it funny. You know, there's just some things that make you laugh, and there's a lot of things that don't. So, but if something can make you laugh, I see there. This car is driving so well for the old girl that she is. And this car I'm going to refer to as a she. The design of this car has very feminine features. Like if you go look up 1999 Lexus ES300. Tell me whether the headlights of that car look like male eyes or female eyes. Obviously completely subjective, but let's see. Maybe I can throw out a poll. See, my YouTube channel is so small that I don't even think I have the ability to do polls. Yeah. So Casino, and why David Dobrik is like Sam Rothstein in Casino, is that as the pressure mounted on Sam, on Nick, on their bosses, on everybody, everything just got a little stressful. There came a time in the movie where Sam became afraid that Nick, his former buddy, could try to kill him. I may not even be able to say that word on YouTube, but this is what the movie did. These are fictional people. I'm talking about a movie here. I'll see if YouTube, but this is what happened in a movie. This is not made for kids. This is a movie. I didn't make this movie. I didn't have anything to do with this movie. It would have been nice to work on that movie, but I didn't. I was but a ye child, but a small boy. That if I had seen that movie at the time that it came out, would have probably horrified me for life. So Sam becomes kind of nervous that this guy, which he's witnessed murder other people. I can't even say that on YouTube, but this is, I have to recount the movie. How do you do a movie review of this movie while there's a plane that is like lined up with the road that I'm on. How can I talk about this movie without saying these words? I don't know. I don't know if I can. But this movie is, so it gets to the point where it seems like, or Sam fears that Nikki could come after him. And then there's his wife. Yeah, they got married. So his wife and his one child, So he's got a wife and kids. Nick also has a wife and kids. Whether that matters or not. This is the worst movie recap ever. But the point of it is that Sam starts to have this fear, and then his wife starts getting involved with Nick. You know, there's this little love triangle, but if you've seen the movie, you know the word love triangle is kind of gratuitous, because it's just kind of a whole stew, and none of the ingredients are good. You know what I mean? And so it just kind of gets kind of gross. It gets kind of gross. And so he starts to fear that, and not only Nick, but possibly the mob, the people who employ Nick, would think that they don't need Sam's advice anymore. They can kind of do without Sam. And the thing about getting fired from the mob is it sometimes can end in a little more than just a pink slip and having to find new employment. Sometimes you don't get the opportunity to find new employment after being employed at the mob. Now, I'm not saying that's all the time. I'm not saying all mobs are the same and that's always how it ends up. I'm just saying that sometimes, in some circumstances, your previous employer will greatly decrease the chances of you being able to find a new employer. Maybe it was your fault, maybe it wasn't. I'm not one to say. But what I can say is that Sam, a character in this movie, again directed by Martin Scorsese, you know, made by I don't know what studio, you know, a lot of money went behind this movie for the time. He had this fear that things weren't gonna just kind of sort themselves out. Things may get a little rough. So one of the tactics he conceives of using to be able to thwart off or minimize the possibility that something may go wrong, he decides to use the resources of the casino that he is running, and I would assume the amount of wealth that he's been able to accumulate, because obviously he wasn't doing all this stuff for the mob as a favor, you know. It was a mutual business relationship between his employer and Sam. And so I need to get away from behind this truck. I am behind this horrible, horrible truck that has very sharp metal, heavy machinery. And it's just not a pleasant thing to be behind. So Sam decides he's going to start a TV show, and it's going to be called the Sam Rothstein Show. And it's going to be like a conventional talk show. There's going to be interviews with guests. There's going to be musical numbers. There's going to be jokes. And to the dismay of his employer, which comes to the agreement that him being more public is probably not a good thing. Now, Sam has a line in the movie where he goes, you know, the only way that he can protect himself is to be, you know, public, to be a public figure, because then people can't touch him. No one can tickle Sam while he's a public figure, or so he believes. And this really irks Nick's character. And there's that famous scene out in the desert where on the reflection of Sam's oversized 1980s sunglasses is a very 1980s, 70s car, you know, kicking up dirt across the horizon, you know, over the flat desert. And the lead up to that is this conversation that they have, prefaced by the fact that Sam says that, you know, conversations that take place out in the middle of the desert where no one is watching don't tend to end well. You know, your survivability rating goes down considerably when dealing with mafia-like characters. And mafia characters in the middle of the desert and no witnesses. So that scene, Sam didn't die. He survived that scene. And but you know, things just kind of got worse from there. So the point of it all really is that this idea of making a show with your namesake is a good way to at least be able to gain back a little bit of control of your own affairs. There's another great example of this, and that is with Dan Harmon, the creator of the show Community, and I think Rick and Morty are like the co-creator. And I learned about this by, you know, stumbling upon the show Community and watching it way after it ran and finding it to be a rather enjoyable, you know, well-written, entertaining show. And then learning about the creator and, you know, the head writer of that show and kind of all the drama that went behind the scenes of that show. And I learned that, you know, I was able to learn about the creator, you know, from third-party sources and from the creator himself by him putting out content in the form of podcasts and a documentary and some other material where, you know, it wasn't a third-party show, but it was from the perspective of the creator of these other shows, which he doesn't star in. You know, you see Dan Harmon show up as like part of sets and, you know, part of in-house gags and stuff, but I don't think he ever physically appears, you know, in any of these shows. But in other shows he does. Neither here nor there. So one of the things that he goes over is that there's this whole thing where he created the show Community, and because of his behavior or disagreements, you know, conflict between him and the people who were funding the making of the show, he subsequently got fired from the show and they continued the show without him. And there's a whole saga of, I believe, the 4th season of the show that was, you know, it was, the head writer was someone different. Is that smoke or is that rain? That's crazy along the skyline. But he comes to realize that, you know, there are all these stories being written about him and things being said about him, and he couldn't really, he was a faceless, you know, person. He was a name on a screen, but since he never, you know, no one ever saw him because he was a writer, you know, you don't see most writers, that, you know, and there's all this drama going on, you know, if there was no drama. So because there's all this drama going on, he decided to, you know, create all these things, which is just, you know, about him as a person, you know, not characters or a fiction that he's created, and be able to, at the very least, tell his own story, you know, be able to control the narrative. At least, you know, anybody can say whatever they want about you, but at least you can say your side of the story, and people can believe it or not believe it, as people are going to do. You know, people could grow a liking to you, or they don't. You know, it's just the way of life. So he did this, and I mean, they became successful in their own right, and you know, they gained their own following. Some of them crossing over between the shows and things he made before, and some of them, I presume, being that people are just fans of the things he made outside of those shows. I don't know. I'm just using it as another example of someone who then went on to create their own show out of like what they felt as a necessity. You know, not solely to make money or make a career out of it, but to kind of protect themselves in a very primordial way, you know, in the battle of ideas and of one's reputation and of how the world sees someone. Being able to have your own brand, you know, at least gives you something to stand on, you know, because as has been proven time and time again, people that you wouldn't otherwise ever think that could find an audience, you know, become successful by just being themselves, have been able to. And I mean, it shouldn't be surprising. I mean, I guess it's surprising. It's surprising because everyone has that friend or someone that they knew that was like, I never, you know, no one ever paid attention to that person, and then now a whole bunch of people are paying attention to that person. Yeah, I mean, it's just the way of it. I mean, if you brand yourself in the right way, and enough people get exposed to it, you at least increase the chances that you'll be seen. So should everyone have your namesake show? That's not for me to say. I can only speak for my own show, and that's really the beauty of it. And depending on how you're seeing this, if you're seeing the unedited version of this, it may be less entertaining than a real version of it, or maybe more entertaining. I'm sure the pauses that I'm doing, any of the bloopers that I'm committing, may be entertaining in their own right. Again, I'm driving on one of the most dangerous roads in America. Search for it. The Miami section of I-95 north and south. You know, it's like the last few miles of I-95. I-95, literally. I-95 ends in South Florida. The road continues. It turns into US 1, and then US 1 goes all down until the road physically stops, which is in the Keys. Let me know if you'd like to see more of these videos where I kind of drive around and provide some commentary, some very topical commentary about things that happened in the past. You know, movies that are almost 30 years old. And very topical. What is that? Was that an accident? There's debris all over the road. Jesus Christ. So here's a story. Here's a good story to end this on. So in the same car that I'm driving in now, many moons ago, I was driving on this road going in the opposite direction, and right around this part of the road, up in the top part of my eye, I see this, you know, what could be a bird, could be a plane, could be a bird, could be a plane. But I see it move, and in as quick as your brain can kind of do the calculation of how fast something is moving, my brain does the calculation and realizes that this object is moving pretty fast, pretty quickly, but at the same time I'm moving pretty quickly. So as a reference, if the object was stationary, it would appear as if the object is kicks. Like, I could let it kick, but I don't want to blow the engine. But this car will kick if you needed to. It doesn't jump. It's not a jumpy kind of car. It's like a torque induced speed flow. Like, it'll go, it'll start. I mean, if you need it to go, if you really need it to go, and you press on the pedal, it's gonna go. It's gonna downshift, and it's gonna rev to the maximum that it can rev at, and this car is gonna go bonkers. And you better have your hand on the wheel and your eye on the road, because, and if everything's working, it's just gonna go, and it's gonna go steady, straight down the road. And it's going to be a great experience, and it's going to be smooth as silk. And it's going to put a smile on your face. So this 99, this almost 20-year-old, this car, unfortunately in Florida, for it to be a classic car, it needs to be 30 years old, which is kind of unfortunate. Most other states, it can be, it's 25, but Florida's an extra 5 years. So in like 9 years, this car would be a classic car. And I believe in 9 years, this car could be riding almost as smooth as what it's driving at 21 years old. This car can drink. So I've done a lot of repairs. I've done the most DIY car work than I've ever done in my life in this car over the last, let's call it a year. And I'd say the repairs have definitely paid off. I mean, as far as ride quality, it's second to none. I mean, the only thing this car doesn't have is the new car smell. But as far as how it rides, as far as how it rides, it's pretty incredible. I'm about to go fill it up with gas. Since I've last filled it up, I've gone 186.7 miles based on the odometer. I'm somewhere between a quarter tank and half a tank. It's an 18.5 gallon tank. So let's see how many gallons it took to go 186. And this has been mixed city traffic, highway driving like I just did. I've been test driving this car a lot. Number one, for fun, and number two, because I've done a lot of changes to this car, so I'd rather put it through some paces when I don't really have somewhere to go than when I do and something fails then. So, but it rode incredible. I mean, that little boost where it went to 6,500 RPM, I was like, whoa, 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 because it's an old engine. I don't know. It's supposed to, but you know, it's not supposed to drive like that. So I like to, you know, use it if I get to that point, and then let it coast. You know, let it coast right out of that, so it can relieve some of the pressure. But it took it well. There's no check engine light. There's a check engine light on this car for a long time related to the oxygen sensor. The bank one, sensor one, threw up a P1133 and P1135 code, and it was the oxygen sensor. And I finally, my dear mother gifted me this OBD reader, and I got the app, and which is incredible. I mean, the fact that, you know, there's scan tools that go for thousands of dollars, and I can get a lot of the information that the $1,000 scan tools get for 10 bucks, 20 bucks. I think it's like 10 bucks for the reader and like 10 bucks for the app. $10 for the reader, 10 bucks for the app, and you have something that can not only give you the error codes, because I mean, you can go to your auto parts store, your local AutoZone, your local Discount Auto, and they'll scan it for you, and you can get a printout, and you'll get the codes. But having to save a trip, you know, just a few trips to the auto store to get the codes read would pay for the scan tool, you know. But then being able to actually get a lot of the variable readouts, so you're able to, the computer, you know, it gives out the codes, but obviously your computer knows a lot about what's going on in your car's engine. That's why there's wires and sensors all over your engines. All those sensors go back to the computer, and they're converted, you know, their voltage rating is converted into some kind of, you know, variable for the computer for it to then modify. You know, it's sensors and solenoids. That's the basis of the electronic functioning of your car, is sensors and solenoids. Sensors to see what's going on, and then solenoids to respond physically to what it thinks is going on. So when sensors fail, your computer knows less about what's going on, and it's not able to respond appropriately. And things like the air fuel sensor on the back of the engine are monitoring in real time the amount of air and fuel, which is very important for a smooth running engine. And while the car will run, and it's incredible, the car will run, because it ran for many years with that sensor being bad, assuming that it was using other variables to kind of gauge where it was. But looking at the on the app, you could see that, well, this car had a few problems. It had, from the very beginning, it had a bad radiator, it had a bad thermostat, it had obviously old coolant, but that wasn't bad. It had ripped CV axle boots on both the driver and passenger side. It had bad coils. It's gone through, like, since I've had it, I've put 4 or 5 new coils on it. I think I've replaced all but one coil. I've replaced 3 spark plugs. I don't know if the spark plugs are necessarily bad, but they've been replaced, and they were the ones on the hard side, so those should be good for a little while. Hopefully the ones on the back, which is the hard one because it's on the firewall side. The gaskets throughout, the valve cover gaskets were replaced. The gaskets on the intake manifold, most of them have been replaced. I think all but the final one that's below, like the distributor or whatever you call it. It's after the actual intake manifold. Then the coolant was replaced. It was all flushed out and replaced with new, OEM coolant. Then the power steering, on the power steering system, most of the rubber hoses were replaced. The housing for the actual rack was replaced because I cross-threaded the housing that was on there. Unfortunately, I was able to find a junkyard part because for like 10% of the price of the new one, and it seems to be working fine and not leaking. It was leaking a little bit, but then I just had to tighten because I'd actually put it a little loose because I didn't want to pressure and cross-thread another freaking housing. Because when you change the housing, you got to change the gasket, so you got to wait for the gasket to come in, and that on the power steering's been changed. The inner tie rods, the bellows, the outer tie rods, the lower ball joints, the struts, and all the rubber, the struts, the coils were retained. The mounts were replaced. The battery's been replaced. Some of the rubber hoses, vacuum hoses have been replaced. The throttle body has been cleaned. The gaskets inside the idle air control valve were cleaned. The mass airflow sensor was cleaned. The air filter was changed. The cabin air filter, I went to change it, but there was no cabin air filter in here. So a cabin air filter was added. Obviously it has the slot for it, but for whatever reason there was no cabin air filter in here. But now there is one, and it's the Denso OEM. So that's up to quality. And really my whole goal of this has been to get it to factory, mechanically. Now if you see, there's this very old, this is a seat. That's how old this car is. This is a steering wheel cover that itself has degraded, that the leather is gone. It's been sitting in the South Florida sun for a while. So, and I could just, it's $10 and just get another one, but I've purposely not, because I want to spend every dollar to get this mechanically as sound as possible, from the engine and the transmission to the the struts and the suspension, and all of the hydraulic systems. The next thing I think I'm going to do is bleed the brakes of fluid, replace the fluid. I have some fluid I bought from before that's AutoZone fluid, and I may do the flush twice. I may do a bleed once to put in all the AutoZone fluid and have it be at least clean fluid, and then go and get the Toyota, because it's pretty like a comparable price, but I have not old, I think it's just a few months, but it's sealed brake fluid, and I can at least use that to clean out all the old fluid, bleed it all the way out until it's clear, and then bleed out all that fluid that now can clean up some of the stuff with the Toyota fluid, and then it'll be pristine Toyota fluid. Oh, which reminds me, the brake booster was changed. So this car, I had fixed all the suspension, and then on my first test drive around, when I would brake, the engine would go to very low RPMs. It would vibrate like crazy. It would not be running right, and it was kind of scary. And then there was this loud hissing sound, what sounded obviously like a bad vacuum leak. So it was hard to pinpoint, because I cleaned the throttle body, but I didn't change the gaskets, stupidly of me. So, I don't know if I mentioned the thermostat was bad, and then when I changed the thermostat, I didn't get the gasket for the hose that goes to the thermostat. So when I first put it, it leaked, and then I had to put different coolant. So there was like a whole slush of coolant, of different kinds of coolant in the engine. And then I learned about how important it is to have at least the same kind of coolant. And if you're gonna just go and you're gonna clean the whole system, put the OEM coolant, at least do it. And it's a comparable price, so might as well at least do it right the first time. So putting in I put the thermostat in, and I had that whole slush of coolant, and then when I did the whole suspension job, I drained both the coolant system and the power steering system, because taking out the rack and everything obviously you flush or you drain the whole power steering system. And I replaced it actually with, because I was using, you know, just discount auto parts store power steering fluid, which most of the time can clear. And then on the owner's manual, it says you can actually use transmission fluid. It says to use transmission fluid. Now it says to use the Dexron 3 transmission fluid, but on the transmission on this car, it says to use the Type TIV. So, and for the transmission in the owner's manual, it says to use the Dexron 3, but when you take out the dipstick on the transmission, it says Type TIV. So I got the Type TIV, Type T4, I don't know how you say it, and I replaced the two drive axles, the driver side and the passenger side axle. And when I took out the drive axle and I was checking to see the system, I actually ran the car a little bit with the drive axle taken off, and a bunch of transmission fluid leaked out, as it does. So it kind of, I haven't drained the transmission system, but it's accidentally drained because of that error. So I've added, you know, some of the Type 4. There may have been Type 4 in there. I don't know what was in there before, but it now has, you know, it's been topped off with at least a couple quarts of the Type T4. And then the power steering system was drained and now has exclusively Type T4, you know, made with a mix of whatever power steering slushy was left, you know, in the residue of the pipes and things like that. But so there's good fluid. It's working fine. You know, it seems it has Toyota transmission fluid in the transmission and the power steering, the Toyota coolant, and it drives exceedingly well. I mean, the smoothness that the engine was able to get to 6,500 RPM, and I mean the speeds it was able to hit, and the quickness it was able to hit those speeds, the oxygen sensor, and also the gas cap. Just put a new gas cap on the car, an OEM gas cap. It had an aftermarket gas cap that had a few years on it. So, and I mean, you could tell just right off the bat, the first time I put the new gas cap, that thing gets on there tight. So, and on the old gas cap, you could see that there was actually gas around the O-ring, like it was almost leaking out, you know, like there's liquid probably beyond where the O-ring seals it, so it looked like gas was seeping through and evaporating through. Whereas now, I mean, I'll see if there is. I haven't checked it. I sealed it when I got it right from the dealership, and it hasn't given me any codes. And the last time I took this drive, you know, it was giving me the P0446 code, which is the evap, and I didn't know if it was it's a lot of people say it's the charcoal canister, which is like under the car in the back. It could also be the little solenoid that's up under the hood. And I actually went and I unplugged the electrical connector, and I connected a couple of the electrodes and connected it up to the battery, and I actually heard that clicking. So it's at least still an active solenoid, which brings me to the VVT solenoids, which were an interesting issue. So after I had fixed, you know, I was fixing the vacuum leak and things like that, and I fixed the gaskets on the throttle body. So I did the suspension, I test drove it. It had that problem where when I pressed on the brake, that it idled real bad and it got real shaky. And you know, the check engine light is on, but that's one of the things in the check engine light, when you're not checking the code, if you get used to the check engine light, because it has a code that you think you could drive with, or at least it drives with the code, there could be other codes coming up that you don't become aware of that are telling you that there's other problems that need to be fixed. So with those issues, I was hearing the leak. I'm like, I know there's a vacuum leak somewhere. I couldn't pinpoint where it was. So I'm like, well, maybe when I did the throttle body, obviously not replacing the gaskets, that was probably a mistake. Let me put the new gaskets on. Put the new gaskets, still getting a hissing sound. I then realize that I go and I drive it, and I come back and it's at night when I go and do the test drive, which is actually a good thing because I was able to spot this and not drive the car anymore, where when I opened the hood, the catalytic converter on the front bank got red hot, and you could see it at night. You know, you open the hood, everything's dark, but it's bright, not bright, but orange glow, and that's no bueno. So I stopped driving the car and had to go back to the drawing board yet, figure out what's going on. I'm still hearing the hissing even after doing the gaskets, and I realized that there could be a vacuum leak could cause the catalytic converter, because if air is coming into the system, and the vacuum leak was sounding, either around where the brake booster is or around that area on the top of the engine, and like something was leaking. So, and air's getting in after the mass airflow sensor, which can make it run lean, causing it to dump more fuel into the engine, and then fuel's burning in the catalytic converter, making it get above its temperature and getting red hot. So there's definitely a problem, and it's very undrivable, and it was not a good time. It was contemplating, is this a junker car? Like, is that the end of the life? Like, is the engine going? Like, what's going on? Obviously if you're mechanically inclined, and once you get to the solutions I'm going to talk about, where I can have this drive right now and I can be impressed with the ride quality, is that I finally got the app. I finally got the $10 app, plugged it in, and found that it was throwing up a P1354 code. And if you have any of these Toyotas, Lexuses that have the VVTi system, the 1354 code is that it's detecting a problem in your VVTi solenoids. And your VVTi system, there was, this is 99, so I think this is like the first engine to get it, the VVTi system, or like at least the first Lexus ES to get it. And I think the Camry got it a couple years later. The Avalon may have gotten it in the same year, but it was right around the 99 to 2002, 2004, where all the engines went VVTi. And the main there's actually a couple important differences, which, if you actually care to learn about it, it introduces you to some interesting concepts about the engine. So it's getting this VVTi code, and people are saying, if you look this code up, people are fixing it by being able to clean the VVTi solenoid. Some people are finding that the engine is gelling up, and so the engine is pretty much, without ungelling the engine, the VVTi solenoids aren't able to work. And so there's a lot of problems that it could be, from the whole car, the engine's pretty much kaput, to it being an almost free fix, just some cleaner and some time to be able to clean out these solenoids. So I see that it's likely this VVTi system, and it could be an oil, and I just did an oil change as well, so the car has had new oil on it. But here's actually something that may go into some of the solution of this, is that I did an oil change, but I let the oil drain for a couple of days. Like, I let it drain for a good amount of time, because I was going to have it up to do the suspension anyway, so I'm like, might as well let me just have it drain out, completely, as much as it can. And I even threw in like some old oil and just had it, run through and just drain right out. Not old oil, but like some oil I wasn't going to use anyway. It wasn't the right viscosity. So I just poured it in and let it drain all the way out. And then, after a couple of days, I sealed it back up, put the the full high mileage synthetic Supertech oil, the 5W30. I put a Toyota filter. So this whole car, this is the first time I've bought parts from the dealer. I've always bought parts from local auto part stores, and the Walmarts and the local stores of the day. But I got introduced to buying stuff at the dealership by doing some part number searching and things like that, and then landing on the dealership, and then realizing the local dealership happens to have on some parts happens to have a very comparable, sometimes cheaper price than the auto parts store. And I'm actually going to pull out an example. So one of the things that went on this car is, I can't believe I had my seatbelt on that whole time, are these little stoppers. and if you've ever seen these before, then you already know what I'm talking about. They go on your brake pedal, and they allow, look, they have the little symbol there. I'll show you upside down. The little symbol there of the seat and the brake pedal. So these go on the back of the brake pedal, and they give a little rubber stop for the little plastic button that turns on and off your brake lights. So when you're not pressing on the brake, there's a spring that pulls the brake pedal back so that it's always pressing on this button, and when the button's pressed, the lights are off. When the button's depressed, and the button has some kind of spring in it, so that when you push the brake pedal, its spring releases and now the brake lights go on. So when this little thing goes, there's now enough travel for the button to push out onto the metal backstop of the brake pedal, so that now your lights are on, which is not a good thing, because if you leave your car parked and the lights are on, you're going to come back after a while, your battery's just going to be dead. And your brake lights are always on. You know, you're not telling, it's a big problem. So it's like one of those problems you need to, you know, if you're driving anywhere, you need to solve rather quickly. And if not, it's a safety issue for yourself, because you could get left stranded, and for the people driving behind you, because they don't know when you're braking. So it's a good thing to solve. So I was looking, I'm like, why are the brake lights on? Now I went under, and sure enough, I see these little flakes of plastic, and I look up in the mechanism, and it's crazy how everything's connected, just these little nuanced things. But so I replaced the brake booster, and to replace the brake booster, you have to just disconnect the brake pedal with enough travel to let the little clamp that holds the brake pedal, you know, there's a clamp that's literally like a V clamp, and then the brake pedal's a sideways shaft like this, and it pushes on that, which pushes on the piston, that pushes on the brake booster, that then pushes on the brake master cylinder, which then pushes fluids all the brakes in your car to an ABS system, which then regulates it, which then sends it to all the brakes in your car. Jesus Christ. That then makes sure that we all don't die driving these death machines on the road. So working on the brake, booster meant that this system, which probably hadn't been touched forever, in 20 years, you know, since the car left the factory, it's just been kind of sitting there, has now been touched and moved. So this little plastic thing likely got very brittle, and if I had never changed the brake booster, I probably wouldn't have had to replace this. But since I did, and I moved the pedal, and I mean, normally that little stopper is just in contact and has tension on with the button, so everything's being held in place. But once it gets loose and it gets moved around in other directions, it started to fall apart to the point that now the button was just traveling. So I got this little piece, and this little piece from Advance Auto Part, this little package. So I went in, and they're supposed to have what is the actual part number on the auto parts store, but you had to order it, and it's like a $2 part, and you have to buy $35 worth of stuff to get the free shipping, and if not, shipping's like $10. So now you're spending $12 on a $2 part. So there wasn't many good options. But let's see, where is the receipt for this? But that little part, or that little box that has, and looks like it has a couple of different stoppers. I don't see the receipt. Oh, I think I took it inside. But it was $8, so with tax $8.50. Now, this little part, mind you, you could order it and spend $10, you know, for shipping, but it's a $2 part. So I already had in my mind that this is, well, I mean, it's a little piece of plastic, like, come on. So then I go to the dealership, and I find the part number, you know, and the good thing about the dealership shopping, there's good and there's bad. There's good because they have the literal drawings and the designs of your car and of all of its systems and of all the parts. This is for Toyotas and Lexuses. I don't know if other manufacturers have the same system, but definitely Toyotas and Lexus. Whatever car you have, you can go to parts.toyota.com, parts.lexus.com, select the place that's near you, but you're really just, they're all using the same, if they're using that system. Now, there are some dealerships that don't use the Toyota part system, which doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe they have to pay a premium or whatever, and sometimes you can find the part at another dealership that has it for cheaper than the ones that are on the Toyota system, and they're using a different system, but you can't do the ordering online or a lot of the things that makes the part buying experience very seamless and hassle-free through the when they're using the Toyota system. So you go, you put your dealership, you put the model of your car, and here's a trick: go to the Lexus one, find, and especially for the ESs and the RXs, which are essentially Camrys and Avalons and RAV4s, just rebadged for Lexus, and given there's some parts that are obviously the interior and everything is unique to Lexus, but a lot of the stuff that's under the hood, a lot of the stuff that's on the suspension are just pulled from those models, because that's how Toyota works. They use a lot of the parts, they make the parts well, and they use them for multiple platforms of cars. So go and look for the part, go into the system. There is a lot of navigating. You got to go into the right system, and then the hardest part is being able to read the diagrams the right way. There's a lot of parts where it's just going to be obvious. You're going to look, you're going to see the part that's wrong, you're going to see the diagram, it's all going to match up, boom. Now you can get the part number. Now get the part number from Lexus. Go find the part. If you have a Lexus, if you have a Toyota, then you just go straight to Toyota. But if you have a Lexus and you want to pay less for the part, go grab that part number, see how much they're charging at your local dealership, copy that part number, and search for it on Google. One of the listings should come up that it's partstoyota.com in that part number. You can also just go straight to parts.toyota.com and search that part number, but ironically, Google search has better chances of finding the part on their website than their search has to find the part on their website, which is why people use Google. I mean, why does Google have the monopoly? Because of shit like that, So you can go put the part number in there. You may have to put the hyphen between. The Toyota's part numbers are 5 numbers and 5 numbers, and sometimes they add a couple, especially for like specific Lexus parts, but most Toyota parts is a 10-digit number, separated by 5 numbers. But if you put the whole number together, you'll likely find it on Google. If you put it together, sometimes you'll find it on parts.toyota.com. Sometimes you may need to put it with the hyphen, and sometimes it'll just take you directly to the page. So once you find the part, now compare it, and then compare it on Toyota and Lexus, and then compare it at your different local dealerships, depending on how many dealerships you have, within distance to you. And then what that allows you to do is it allows you to pick it up at the dealership, and then there's no shipping cost. So your hard cost to get the part could be less. Now, if you're in the South Florida area, other dealerships may do this too, but I can only speak to the dealership that I've been purchasing all my parts from, which is Toyota of North Miami. And they're not sponsoring this video. They haven't given me any money for this. I've just been buying parts from there. And I would say that the shopping experience is extremely predictable. Like, and you're gonna get what you asked for. And that's very important, because there's been a lot of hard parts challenges in doing DIY car repairs, as there always is. There's dangers of doing DIY car repairs, especially if you have to get up under the car and there's a car above you, and depending on how you've secured the car above you, you may have set yourself up to be the last time you do any kind of DIY car repair, because the car falls on you. So there's danger involved. There's the danger of injury, and then there's the danger of making things worse, causing more problems than you solve, by doing things wrong, or like I did, where I cross-threaded the housing of a power steering. That's probably been my biggest error, my most costly error. And I guess I'm gonna start a Patreon, if the show takes off, and I can go into stories that I may not want to say on the public show. How about that? We can go into some story. It's a great little story, but I'm not gonna put it on this show. But if people like this show enough, and you want the extra nonsense rambling stories, then maybe I'll add it to there, because I'll give the people what they want. That's what this is all about. That's what give the people what they want. And I'd say one of the most exciting parts about DIY car repairs is waiting for parts, because it's been the closest thing to Christmas for me. How sad is that? That like getting car parts is like an exciting thing. You know, it's like the fresh car part smell. Like people I think are just have an inclination to like new shit that smells new, shit that looks new. And so getting something new, even if it's something as trivial as like a gasket, you know, for a part of a car, it's not very exciting on its own, but in the context of the entire system of being able to have a great driving experience, it's exciting. And that's what became exciting about getting car parts. It was the excitement of, oh man, when I get, how much, what's going to change, what's going to improve by changing out this part. And everything from speakers in this car were changed out. So I got from the junkyard, and there's a whole drama I can get into about the junkyard. The junkyard, the stories I have, junkyard tales I have for you. And I've just been there a few times. I'm sure people have junkyard tales for days, but I have some junkyard tales. So I may do another episode where we go into junkyard tales. This will be Rick's junkyard tales. But I was able to get speakers for an incredible price. I don't even want to reveal the price that I got. They're Sony speakers that have the little treble speaker in the middle. So, you know, they're about this big around, and then they have the little treble speaker in the middle for the and they sound awesome. I would play some right now, but I'm not going to get this. If anybody's going to watch this video and it's going to get monetized for any reason, I'm getting 100% of the money, because it's just me talking, and there's no music, there's no fanfare, there's nothing that is not original. This is the most original video on YouTube. We did it, everyone. So I guess the point, to wrap up the show, we started talking about the importance of having your own show, being able to control your own life, control your own destiny, be able to have your own image, for better, for worse. People are probably going to see this video and be like, this dude just keeps rambling nonsense. Cancel this man. Cancel him. And people that are like, what are you talking about? What are these? Why are you talking about this car in Casino? And here's the punchline. If you got to this part of the movie, I'm going to tie it all back together, baby. From Robert De Niro and Scorsese and Casino and Sharon Stone and this 1999 Lexus ES300. Did you know? This is the longest did you know that you're going to have. It's taking me like an hour to get to this fact, to this inane fact. Did you know that when they were releasing the movie Casino, which car did they use? Which car did they use to promote, to promote the movie Casino? Oh no, which movie did this car use to promote itself when it was being launched? I guess it's like a cross promotion. I don't know. I don't know who benefited more, the movie Casino or the Lexus ES. Because yes, when the Lexus ES, I don't know if it was this model, but it was the 95, so it obviously wasn't the one that came in 97, because this one came after it. But when they were trying to push the Lexus ES and the whole rebranding from the old boxy one to the first one that kind of looked like this one, you know, looks very similar to this one, but is, you know, just a little different, the 92 to 96 version, they brought this car up on the red carpet. I think Sharon Stone got out of it, and this was like the hot car of 1995, baby. This really was. Look it up. I was surprised by it. So the Lexus ES, not the LS, the ES. They wanted to promote the ES, and they had Sharon Stone get out of it, and she was like the hot thing at the time, especially with the Scorsese movie coming out. And I mean, I guess that's why this car, one of my favorite movies of all time, and one of my favorite cars of all time, because it's just my car, is Together Again. Thanks for watching. Share this video if you found. I'll be cutting this up into clips. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Thanks for watching.